Hi, this is Ms. Hadi from Olympian High School. I'm going to teach you a little bit about the time period between World War I and World War II. It corresponds to the Traditions and Encounters textbook by Dr. Bentley that talks about it as the age of anxiety, this period of sort of post-war depression, anxiety. You can imagine you've just endured a war where 15 million people have died, 20 million people injured, all of these upheavals and changes and sort of the resulting feelings and theories and sort of fallen idols that we'll talk about as because of that. The chapter itself is really interesting. It starts off with this really cool picture that was painted by Otto Dix, and he did not add this little mustache that's indicative of representing Hitler until after the end of the war, World War II. By that, I mean after Hitler was no longer in power. So the vignette is a little bit about Adolf Hitler. Some of you have heard that name before. This is the name of the man that will end up taking Germany into World War II, and he's depicted in the book. This chapter, we don't see World War II beginning, but we'll read about it in the next chapter. Okay, so you'll read the vignette. You'll learn a little bit about some of the changes that are going to take place, including the ideas of Hitler's party, National Socialism, Nazis, and communism, all of the changes. And then you'll get into this section, Probing Cultural Frontiers. And in it, there's like an introduction which talks about some of the changes intellectually that are going to take place at that time because of the war, changes because of science, psychology, art, architecture. The war impacts all of those fields, and how changes in science will also cause people to sort of have a feeling of being unsettled or uncertainty. We see it in painting. So let's begin with this post-war pessimism. And I'll also use the lecture to teach this to you. So you are all a lost generation. Both the chapter and the PowerPoint talk about this reference by Gertrude Stein, a famous poet, talking about the generation of intellectuals, literati who were American intellectuals living in Paris after World War I, and who really expressed sort of the disillusionment following World War I. You can read A Farewell to Arms online. I put a link on my website. You can read a little bit potentially for extra credit about how people felt, but a lot of their writing was about the meaninglessness of the war and the meaninglessness of death. There's a lot of disillusionment, pessimism over the idea of human progress that many people had believed human society would always get better. So in your book, you're going to read about Oswald Spengler's Decline of the West, a teacher who wrote about sort of the decline of Western society, a historian named Arnold Toynbee, who wrote a large classic about how all societies grow and then fall. So again, this idea that like organisms, societies fall. There was also a lot of religious uncertainty. Theologians came to remind people that, not necessarily promised in Christianity that God's, paradise is on earth, that to think that humans are going to somehow, be able to realize God's vision on earth was incorrect. So a lot of Christian theologians arguing against this idea that, that humans are going to just make things better and better. Other attacks on progress have to do with how science and technology were going to make science better and better. So that was, refuted by poison gas and by the explosives that took place during the war. So science doesn't always make things better. Another devoted idol that was challenged was the idea of democracy. So most societies had the ability to vote, where everyone could vote without property restrictions. Even women gained the vote or the right for suffrage after World War I. But many people started to think that democracy had got them into this problem of the war, and that party politics was a problem with democracy. So many intellectuals disliked democracy and started to see it as a weak system that allowed too many people a voice, the rule of inferiors, unintelligent people. And this spread outside of places like Germany, where, for example, you have this essay by the Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega y Gasset that talks about how, it's not necessarily a powerful or good system to have democracy. I'll teach you more about the rest of the slide in the next video lecture. But there's this loss of what's the right thing to do? What are the institutions that should guide us? The loss of a moral compass.